Welcome to my channel. In this video we will learn about how we can create alerts and action sheets using UIAlertController class. Here we have the demo application. This is what we will be building. We have two buttons. Once the user presses the logout button, they are presented with this alert, which has a title saying warning and an information about the action they're about to take. User can either cancel or they can press yes and proceed with the logout process. Similarly, we have share button. Once pressed, an action sheet pops up from the bottom of the screen, again with the title and a message and the available options to share the content. Further, we will extend our tutorial to create a universal alert controller class, and we will explore the need of a universal class. Here we have a view controller with two buttons. This view controller is associated with the view controller file. We have two methods corresponding associated to each button we have in the view controller, and we will start creating the alerts first. In order to show the alert to the user, we will create a function called show alert. Then we will call this function on the first method for our logout button. So when user presses the logout, an action will call this function called show alert. Now let's see how can we create UI alert controllers. As you can see from the developer's documentation, the UIAlertController class is a subclass of UI view controller, and this class is responsible to configure the alerts and action sheets along with the messages to display them to the users. Here we can see how can we initialize the UIAlertController class. In order to initialize, we need an optional title, a message which can be optional string as well, so this can be left empty, and a preferred style. If we check on the preferred style, the preferred style is an enum, which we have two options. You can choose action sheet or alert. Now let's create an alert controller in here. We will create a constant called alert controller, and we will initialize the alert controller class. Here we will have to pass a title, which will be the title of the alert controller that will be displayed to the user. The title we will place as warning. A message can be a convenient message to the user to let them know what a user is about to do. So in our case, we can warn the user, or we can let the user know that are you sure you want to log out. In the preferred style, we will choose alert in our case. Showing an alert to the user using UIAlertController is a three-way process. In the first step, we create the alert controller. In the second step, we configure and add the actions to the alert controller. And finally, we present the alert controller to the user. Since we already have the alert controller configured, let's create an action. In our case, we need two actions, for the cancel action and another one to log out. So user can change their mind by pressing the cancel button, or they can proceed with the logout process by pressing the logout button. Let's see how can we create the actions now. We can initialize an action by UIAlertAction class. As you can see, we can have a title to this action, a style, and a optional handler. The title is a string. A style is again an enum, which has three values: a default value, cancel, and destructive. Default, it just applies the default look, whereas cancel button is used when we want to leave the things unchanged. The destructive case tells the user that their data can be altered or changed if they proceed with their action. Let's create our logout action first. We will create a constant called logout action, and we will initialize UIAlertAction with a title of logout and a style of type destructive. This is where a user will see the red logout button. Make sure whatever action you create, you have to add them to the alert controller itself. So we will do alertcontroller.addAction and logout action. Another way to create an action is directly adding the action in the alert controller and configuring it within that method. Let's say we want to create a cancel action. We can simply do alertcontroller.addAction. Here, since this takes UIAlertAction, we can simply initialize the alert action within block. So we will set title cancel and the style to cancel as well. Both approaches work perfect. It's just a matter of your choice. And if you want to let your code look more nice and clean, we can simply configure the action first and then we can add it to the alert controller. The last step is to present this alert controller. So since this alert controller is a subclass of UI view controller, this has access to the view controller method called present, which is used to present the alert view controllers we want. In our case, we want to present the alert controller and animate it to be true. Now if we run our application, you can see when the user presses the logout button, they are presented with two options, either cancel or the logout. Pressing any one of these buttons doesn't do anything yet because this action does not have any handler associated to any of these buttons yet. Let's say if the user presses the logout button, we want to log them out from the server as well. So we will create a handler in this case. Handler is a type of closure. We don't need any parameter in the first closure, so you can leave it blank. But here we can do the server stuff here. In order to make sure the code works, we can print you are being logged out. We don't need any handler for the cancel action because at this point the user doesn't want to do anything and we want to leave the things unchanged. If we rebuild our application and we click on the logout button, user selects the logout, you can see a console message is popped up saying you are being logged out. So this is a good chance where you want to log out the user from the server or you want to perform any additional actions when the user makes their decision to use one of your configured actions. Now we have seen how we can show the alerts to the user. Let's create an action sheet next. As you can see in our application, the share button doesn't do anything because there is no method or function being called on this button yet. In order to create an action sheet, we will create another function called show action sheet. We will call this function under share button pressed method. Creating an action sheet is a similar process as creating the alerts for anyone. With the magic of editing, I will quickly configure the action sheet and we will go through the code together. Alright, so we are back. In this function, we have configured the alert controller. In the similar way, we configured it for our alert view controller at top. If you notice, this alert controller has a title, a message, and the preferred style is the only difference we have. So instead of alert, we are using an action sheet. Next, we have configured two actions, one for email and another one for WhatsApp. Then we added these actions into our alert controller along with the cancel action. And finally, we presented our alert controller, which is a type of action sheet. If we run and build our application, when the user presses the share button, you can see they are able to choose from available options or they can cancel their mind by pressing the cancel button. We have seen how easily we can create alerts and action sheets in our application and present useful information to the user. Now let's talk about why do we need a universal alert controller. I have modified our application, added 3 buttons into it. Anytime when the user presses this button, we want to display a different message. All those 3 buttons are wired up with our IB actions in our view controller file. So what options do we have if we want to show the user with the unique messages each time when they press a unique button from our application? We have 2 choices. One, we can create multiple alert controller functions for each alert type and then call them within our IB action buttons corresponded to the message we want to convey. Second option we have is we can create a function and then pass the custom title and message each time when that method will be called within our associated IB actions. Let me show you how. We can create a function called show alerts. This function will have custom title of type string, a message of type string. Next, we will create an alert controller in the same way we created earlier. So this will be a constant called let alert controller initialized with AlertController class with the title and a message. In this case, we don't want this title to be a hard-coded string. So we will pass this title in here, and similarly the message string. The style will be an alert. Let's assume that our users have only one action to choose from. In this case, we just want to display the OK action so they can retry. We will add the OK action in the same way we added it previously. Finally, we will present this alert controller. What we can do is we can simply call this function on the first button, pass a title saying oops, and a message. In the same way, we can copy and paste the same function into different buttons and just change the message type. Okay, so if we build our application, when the user presses the password function, we can see the password incorrect message comes up. Similar to other one, username is not correct, and the server side error happened message. This approach is okay if you only have one view controller, where you can simply create one function and then call that based on different parameters for different scenarios. Imagine now your application has grown and you have probably 5 or 10 or maybe more view controllers. In that case, it is not a good practice that you copy this function on each and every view controller of your application and then call it anywhere you want. This will be a repetition of code, and it will be very hard to maintain the code throughout all view controller processes. So how can we deal with this situation? In order to create a universal alert controller, we will create a new file which will be a type of file Swift. We will name it AlertController. Here we can create a class called AlertController. What we can do is we can create a class function similar to our function in view controller, which will take title, a message, and then that will present the alert controller. So let's copy this function. Here we will use class keyword in front of the function. In order to eliminate these alert controller errors, we need to import the UI kit in here. Okay, so our function is ready. However, we have an issue with presenting the alert controller. Since this alert controller class does not know anything about the view controller, it doesn't have access to the present function. In order to deal with this situation, what we can do is we can create another parameter for this function, which will be a type of UI view controller. Then we can call this present method on this VC. So basically what we are doing is we are telling this function that you should take a title, a message, and a view controller where you will be used. Then finally we will configure our alerts as usual and present that alert controller. Now let's see how can we use this class. Back in our original view controller, I'm just gonna delete our boilerplate code. Since we configured our show alerts method as a class function, we can directly call this in our any view controller. So in order to call that method, what we can do is we can simply say alert controller dot show alerts. Here the title, again it can be anything, saying error. The message is password error, and the VC in here is self. So this view controller where this function is being used. Similarly, we can copy and paste it in our other functions and simply can change the correspondent error. Now if we run our application, from the user standpoint, nothing has changed. However, our code looks much more cleaner. Now back to our original scenario. If we had multiple view controllers, we could simply go to one of them where you wanted to show the alert and call this method again by saying show alerts. The title you can say second view controller in this case, or anything you want to tell the user. A message can be anything and VC can be self. As you can see, instead of repeating this lengthy function over and over, all we have to do is call this single function within your application wherever you want to display the alert to the user. Or we can also pass a different parameter called style. If in case your application supports different kind of styles, for example, an alert or action sheet. Here we can say style, and this will be UI alert controller style. When you will call this function, a third parameter will be available for you to determine if you want to change the style to action sheet or alert. Alright, so that's all from me. I hope you learned something from this video. If you have any questions, you can put them in comment section and I will try my best to answer them. Make sure you subscribe my channel and hit the like button, share it with your friends. Thank you very much.